I was almost burnt alive before I was saved by the hottest firefighter in the city. As if my last interaction with Noah, my bespectacled creep of an ex-boyfriend, wasn't enough to ruin the day, a fire broke out in my apartment sometime after midnight. I didn't even realize it in my sleep until I felt an itch in the wound I'd sustained because of Noah. I rubbed the wound over the bandage, but the itch didn't stop. Soon, I realized that I could feel intense heat all over my body, and I knew something was wrong the moment my subconscious registered sirens and screaming from the outside. I woke up with a gasp and realized to my horror that I was about to be burned to crisp. The fire was blazing, and the intensity of orders was increasing. I was ashamed to admit I started crying instead of looking for ways to get the hell out of there. But the very thought that someone, probably Noah, considering his violent habits, could have done this didn't leave my mind. I had half a mind to think maybe it all happened because of my stupidity, but something in me did say it wasn't my fault. But I had little time to think of any of that, and I finally made the first move to help myself. But the fire was blazing, and the heat was getting to me. Then, as if I was part of a poor romance, all I could remember before finally losing consciousness was Dexter's horribly mangled face. I wasn't sure if I screamed at the sight of it or not, but I couldn't forget that face even when I was unconscious. Before we move on to the next part, exactly who was Dexter? Dexter was a firefighter at the local station. I met him months ago after two of my wannabe journalist friends dragged me with them to the local fire station, claiming that this was sure as hell going to be their breakthrough. Although skeptical, I still trusted them. It was then, through that interview, that I met the handsome Dexter. No, he wasn't the only hot and handsome firefighter in the station. That profession certainly called for only the perfect set of people, and Dexter happened to be one of the many. Even then, my attention had involuntarily zeroed on him. He had been fooling around with his other coworkers when my friends and I arrived at their block, laughing and talking animatedly to a bunch of equally attractive individuals. And when I arrived in the block, he looked at me immediately. It wasn't even that I had done something to warrant that attention, but the moment I stepped into the block, he had noticed me. Believing that finally I was going to get in touch with a hot man, I immediately informed my friends that it was absolutely necessary we come to the fire station again. And we did do that, and it was then that we finally interacted. So it wasn't really a surprise that he was one of the firefighters who'd come for my rescue, but the vision of his horribly mangled face between the hot flames seemed like something ominous. I couldn't forget about it even after I regained my senses. Well, I was well and alive. Good thing, I hoped. "Ash," Dexter said, coming towards me with a smile. "How are you now?" "Alive," I replied with a small smile of my own. As if in retaliation, the itch on the side of my palm increased, and I winced in pain. I had managed to burn myself after all, even though it wasn't a lot of damage. "Well, being alive is a good thing." "Never denied it," I answered. He sat on the little stool next to the bed. "How did you get that, if you don't mind?" He was asking about the wound Noah had left on me. "Ah, so it is him." I hadn't even said anything, but honestly, I didn't need to. Often when Dexter and I still talked almost regularly, I'd tell him about my disastrous relationship with Noah, but that tradition ended soon after I realized that Dexter did in fact have a boyfriend. He was called Frank or Frankie, I couldn't recall. "It was a little scuffle. I started it," I added, in case he thought any less of me. Dexter gave me a wry smile. "You shouldn't get violent with anyone, much less a man who holds bad feelings towards you, in fact." He stopped for a moment, his eyes not leaving mine for a second. "The first question I want to ask is if you suspect anyone." I furrowed my eyebrows. "Suspect someone for what?" Dexter gave me a grim expression, one that I didn't see much on his charming face. Of the fire, I suspect that there's a good chance that someone was involved in this. A few days later, Dexter's suspicion was correct. The police suspected someone's involvement in the fire as well. They claimed that the setting was well crafted enough to know that it wasn't an accident. It was premeditated, and whoever was behind it would be charged with such and more. Before I was discharged from the hospital a couple of days later, one of the cops asked the same question as Dexter did days ago. Do you suspect someone, or have you got an abusive ex? Basically, a danger to your life. At that time, I didn't have an answer, even though a particular name was swirling in my head. Noah. I had an inkling that he might have been behind it, but at the same time I knew Noah wasn't capable of that. But the cop's disappointed gaze didn't leave my mind even after I left the hospital. They just want to make their work easier, Dexter said, handing me a glass of water. Honestly, I kind of get them. Sometimes it's nice if things aren't messy. Well, I began and clicked my tongue. My first instinct to defend myself in front of such a handsome man. I couldn't just name someone just because I had a bad history with them. Dexter nodded his head. No can do. But even then, there have been many cases of abusive exes involved in such cases, or worse. I wouldn't put it past him. Knowing him as much as you have told me about him, he sat down in front of me and looked at me in a certain way. In the same way he had looked at me all those months ago when we had first caught each other's eyes. Will you be comfortable here? With me, I mean. The house isn't very big, but it should be okay. He was blabbering, and God was it adorable. My heart melted at the sight of him, but the very reminder of why I was here, or what circumstances led me here, was not very kind to my consciousness. It could have started on a better note, but I was ready to take it as it was. I smiled at him, charmed by his sudden shyness. I will be. Thank you. Sharing the same living space was a kind offer that Dexter had given me at the hospital. He had pointed out that since I didn't really have a place to stay, I could always stay with him. I tried to be polite in my refusal, but it was true that he was right. Even my friends weren't in the city, and I didn't have much money left on me. So, without much protest, I took his offer, and that was why I was here. I would have to go and see the remains of my home with the cops the next afternoon. Then, Dexter's phone rang, and it was then he explained that he was still in touch with his ex-boyfriend Frankie. I told him I would be off to sleep and walked into the room he had given me. Dexter was still in contact with his ex, so no doubt he would tell him about everything. And then, there was always a good chance that Frankie would come and meet me, even though I was sure Frankie didn't have any good opinion of me. As I lay on the bed, I couldn't help but scroll through the various pictures I had taken with Noah when we were still in a relationship. By the end of it, I decided to just fuck it and report the police his name. Noah had hurt me several times in the days we were together. He hurt me on the day the fire broke out at my place, so there was always a good chance that he was behind it as well. I knew then what I had to tell the cops tomorrow. The next day. None of the CCTVs were working on that day strangely, one of the cops, Richard, remarked and handed me a copy of the report they'd made of the incident. Not on this side, he continued, and pointed to the right of my apartment. This should have captured whoever was involved in it, but it didn't. The CCTV camera from the next street, however, did capture a figure around the same time the fire broke out. We have to identify who that is, though. I suspect my ex, I replied. We got into an argument the same day. Why didn't you say so before? He asked, sounding a tad bit annoyed. Anyway, he stopped and pointed at an officer right behind him. Provide all the necessary details to Charlie, and we will see what we can do after that. Okay, I replied, a little ashamed. Richard sighed. Look, son, we just want to get this done with, all right? The sooner we find this person, the better, for both of us. so don't withhold any information. Any necessary information, that is. Okay, I replied, a tad bit demurely. Dexter picked me up after that session and brought me to a small restaurant. Apparently, since Frankie worked there, he was sure we'd get some discount. That was the only reason he often visited the restaurant. Actually, he claimed. I couldn't help but laugh at that. Like, he continued, still laughing, why do you think I still talk to him? Oh God, that's so mean! Dexter shrugged, looking a tad bit shamed. Couldn't help myself, he replied. It's okay, I would have done the same thing, I think. I smiled up at him. Frankie came to us then. He had our drinks in his hands and was looking at us strangely. Nothing in his body screamed friendly, and I wondered if Dexter could feel the same. Apparently not, because all he did was give Frankie a gummy smile. Thank you, Frankie, he said. I appreciate it. Would you guys like something else? Frankie asked, his voice as grave and deep as I remembered it from months ago. Blueberry cheesecake is on the house, by the way. Now his tone was a little more energetic, but he was looking at Dexter, so that change made immense sense to me. I like blueberry cheesecake, I answered, my voice tiny. I didn't want to intrude, but the offer sounded amazing. For packing as well, if that's possible. Thank you, I added when Frankie turned to look at me, his expression now grave. It's only for regulars, he answered. Oh, I replied, sounding disappointed. Dexter cleared his throat and nodded at him. Why don't you do that for me then? Care to pack 2 and serve us 1 while we're still here, Frankie? Frankie's smile was fickle, but there. Okay. An hour later, on our way back to Dexter's home, I couldn't help but sneak a glance at him. Your boyfriend's a little creepy, not gonna lie. Dexter gave me a small laugh. That's mean, Ash, but ex-boyfriend, not a boyfriend. He stuffed his hands in his pockets and stared down at me, all the while continuing his walk. Honestly, sometimes Frankie can get a little intense, but that's probably because our relationship lasted a while. He's a little protective of me and a little conscious of people I hang around with, he shrugged. You like him? There was a time when I did, yes. Not anymore, no. When we reached Dexter's place, he gave me his house keys. Make sure to lock the doors at night. It's my night shift, so I will only come back tomorrow. I am full, so I don't need dinner. Ah, this seems very intrusive, I murmured. This would be the first time for me to live at his place without him. It screamed intimacy, and I wasn't sure I knew how to deal with that particular thought. I'll see a hotel or something for today. Hey, shush, we are friends. I trust you. His answering smile was brilliant. But I stopped to let out a sigh. All right, I promise, though, that I will not steal. Sounds like a sound promise. Even his laugh was rich. God. I tucked a few of my loose fringes behind my ears and stood there as if waiting for his kiss. And I knew better than to stand there like that, but with Dexter looking at me like that, I wasn't sure if I was going overboard with my flirting. Was I flirting? I wasn't sure. Did I want to flirt with him? Yes, 100 times yes. Dexter sucked on his bottom lip and then cleared his throat. All right, I will still need to come in though. Gotta get my bag and stuff. Oh, yes. I colored a shame of red and stepped aside to let him in. Sorry. Shh, don't apologize. You do that a lot. Sorry? Dexter's answering laugh was amazing. A few hours later, I was halfway to sleep when there was a knock at the door. It was past midnight, and I knew that it wasn't Dexter. Even so, I opened the door to find Frankie standing on the other side, soaked to his bones. I couldn't understand it. It wasn't raining. Why was he soaked? I allowed him in and gave him the same reason about me being here that Dexter had given him a few days ago. Some stupid kids, Frankie muttered. They poured a bucket of water on me. I'm sorry, I replied and ushered him inside. Would you like to wait in the bathroom? I'm sure there are spare. I stopped when I noticed him making his way towards Dexter's bedroom. I wasn't sure if I should question him, considering Dexter and he had been dating for the longest time, but then he was shuffling items in Dexter's wardrobe, and I knew I had to intervene. What are you doing?" I asked, sounding unsure, even though he was wrong. "Looking for clothes," Frankie dryly replied. I hesitated. "But shouldn't you ask him first? You guys aren't together, right?" He turned to me, a scornful expression on his face. "And you would know that." "Excuse me?" I asked. "Never mind. If you wish to inform him, do so. I don't mind." He grabbed a bunch of clothes from the wardrobe and started undressing in front of me. I cleared my throat and excused myself from there. I wondered if I should inform Dexter of the same, and decided that I should when Frankie strolled into the kitchen looking through the stuff. "Your boyfriend's here," I texted him, and then corrected myself. "Your ex-boyfriend's here. He's being a little creepy looking through your stuff." Dexter replied with a small, "Thank you for informing me," and Frankie's phone rang some moments later. Frankie immediately looked at me, his eyes blazing red with anger. If I wasn't so sure of myself, I would have thought that he would kill me right this second. God, he was acting weirder than my ex-boyfriend. After a small seething phone call, Frankie asked if I had informed Dexter. Before I could reply that only made sense since he had received a call from the said man, he asked why I did that. I rolled my eyes, a move that didn't go unnoticed by him. I had to. "Why?" he asked again. I clicked my tongue. "Well, because you were going through his stuff without asking him. I had to inform him of that." "And why does that matter to you?" he asked. "Because, okay." I stopped. I didn't really have an answer, but I knew what he was doing was wrong. It only made sense. "You're not anything to him, all right? Or are you?" he then asked. "Just a friend," I replied, hesitantly. "Stay like that," Frankie replied, and then walked his way out of the apartment. A few days later, the cops had me. I knew that. He sat in front of me, his arms crossed over his chest, and he assessed me. I knew I was in a tight position, but Dexter had promised that staying honest wouldn't hurt my chances. But I should have known Noah wouldn't go down without a fight. "You doubted your ex-boyfriend Noah, am I correct?" Richard the cop asked. I nodded my head. "Yes, I did." "And you did that because?" "Noah and I had an argument the same day," I replied. "It ended in a violent scuffle of sorts. He hurt me." I stopped and pointed at my bruise. And then, in pure self-defense, I threw that lamp at him. "It was a metal lamp," Richard replied. "It wasn't self-defense. I wasn't thinking." "Why didn't you inform someone of the same? That sounded bad." I sighed. "That kind of thing is very normal between us. Each time we meet, these things are sure to happen. My family is sick of it," I shrugged. "I don't tell them." "Why did you meet him?" he asked. "Because he called me, that's why." Richard shook his head. "Noah said he will file a case against you." I looked at him in confusion. "Why? What for?" My tone was high-pitched. "For endangering his life," Richard answered. "But I didn't do anything of that sort. It was self-defense." Richard tapped his knuckles on the table. "I am sorry, Ash. Besides, we haven't found any incriminating evidence against Noah. We are releasing him. We cannot hold him anymore." He crossed his hands over the table. "We have no evidence against him, Ash. It was someone else, not him. He has an alibi." I glared at him, an act that I knew could bring me trouble. "You're releasing him, acting like he's the victim just because he got hit by a metal lamp because of his own issue? You know he will hurt me, right? Have you seen him? He's a giant." "Has he ever tried that before?" I couldn't believe this chain of questioning. It drove me crazy. A few hours later, Dexter was chewing on a gum and staring up at the sky. It was late at night, and the few stars that twinkled up over us didn't really seem to interest me at all that much. I was stressed, if I had to be honest with myself. With Dexter's ex going bonkers and my own out, I wasn't sure if I was safe anymore. For a minute or two, I even entertained the idea of returning to my parents' farmhouse in the countryside. That was probably the safest place right now, away from all the craziness. But then, I looked at Dexter and thought, hell no. He won't do anything stupid, Ash. Don't worry. I sucked in a breath. I just don't want to get in trouble with him anymore. He must be upset right now. Apparently, his parents insulted him in front of everyone. Dexter gave a loud laugh in return. Deserved. I punched him in the arm. Don't joke, I am stressed. Well, how about you don't think about it anymore? He grabbed my cheek tenderly and made me look up at the open sky. Feel the air. It's nice. Look at the sky. It's so beautiful. Can't think. Mine's running. Oh. Try to stop it then. I gave him a guilty expression, acting as if my heart wasn't threatening to come out of my chest at his touch on my cheek. Isn't working, I replied. Oh, well, here goes nothing, he murmured, and before I could ask what he meant by that, he pressed a quick kiss to my cheek. Now, did that help? I laughed despite my thundering chest. That was so pretentious. Dexter pulled his hand away with a small, shy smile. I tried. I looked up at the sky, suddenly happy and relieved of all my stress and anxiety about his ex and my ex. Thanks, I said. I think it worked. A few days later. Dexter and I were coming out of the hospital after my appointment when we met Frankie. He had been waiting for us around the corner. He explained when Dexter asked him, and he wanted to know what was going on between us. Nothing, I replied, a little annoyed. Well, Frankie clicked his tongue. If nothing is going on, why do you two kiss? It seemed to take both of us aback. When I didn't say anything, Dexter furrowed his eyebrows at him. Whatever does that mean? And why do you care? It's not like we are together. I do care, he replied, sounding angry. Why are you hanging around beggars? Stop calling him that, Dexter replied, closing his eyes just for a second to regain his composure. But Frankie seemed to need that moment to take us by surprise. He lunged at me and punched me right on my nose. I heard a crack and groaned in pain, only to clutch at my nose to make sure it didn't bleed much. At least we were near the hospital. I was going to get poor at this rate. I think your boyfriend needs help, I said, looking at the doctor nursing Dexter's bruised knuckles. Frankie had bitten him when Dexter had shoved at him. Your boyfriend's crazy. Not my boyfriend, Dexter replied, wincing a little. I am thinking of more. Exactly what? I'm going to inform the cops of this. Frankie has been acting weird for months now, and now he hurt you. I do not think it's safe enough anymore. Dexter looked at me. I don't want him to come near you or hurt you. I didn't think he was capable of that, no. He hadn't really been violent when we were together, but something tells me he will not have that decorum anymore. Dexter seemed apologetic, but I couldn't help but focus my attention on one particular thing. What do you mean he's been acting weird for months? It was then I was proven that Frankie, in fact, was a creep. More so, I couldn't help but wonder if he was also behind the fire. I knew I was shooting in the dark, and bringing any innocent person's name in front of the cops would only bring bad news for me, but at the same time, I couldn't help but wonder about the possibilities of the situation. A few days later. Thankfully, I didn't need to go too far with that idea. Frankie did everything on his own. It was a few days after the hospital incident when Dexter had just informed the cops of Frankie's increasingly violent behavior. They had issued him a warning, but I knew it was going to be more after today. Since Dexter and I were kind of seeing each other now, it was common for me to pick him up after work, or whenever I had the time. We often walked home, a form of exercise that Dexter claimed he was all too happy to do with me, or took the bus. Today was one of the days where we walked. It had rained just hours earlier, and the weather was amazing, I told Dexter, smiling up at him despite the cold on my cheeks. I love rainy days. They're so amazing. And beautiful, Dexter supplied. And beautiful, yes. Dexter shrugged. Sometimes we get the worst cases during rains. I hope nothing happens today. Then, because I thought I sounded mean, I added, I mean never. I hope that never happens. Dexter gave me a small laugh and nudged my hand with his own. It was true Dexter and I were kind of seeing each other, but with the latest stress and my insecurity about my burnt hand, I wasn't really sure if I wanted to push it more. It was as good as it was anyway. Dexter and I often kiss a lot. One time, we were kissing so much that we almost burnt the whole kitchen down. It was during the kitchen disasters that I wondered if the fire was all my fault, that maybe it all had just been a mistake. Maybe everyone, including the cops, were wrong about an outsider's involvement in it. But those doubts were often short-lived. The cops had found a piece of cloth near the place after all. It was another thing they couldn't figure out who it belonged to, even though I was pretty sure, considering today's technological reach, that shouldn't sound so impossible. What did Noah reply? Dexter asked, clasping my hand when I didn't bring it away. I mean, after that message you sent. He didn't peel his gaze away from our joined hands, even at the risk of losing his foot or stumbling somewhere. He told me he didn't want to see me anymore, I sighed. I do feel guilty that I pushed it on him. For all I know, I probably did it because I was still angry at him, and not because he was actually dangerous to me. It's all right. He is out now, Dexter replied with a small, careful smile. God, you're always going to be my partner in crime, aren't you? Before he could reply, I was shoved at my back. I didn't even need to turn around to see who it was. Frankie was drunk, and he looked absolutely murderous. Frankie, Dexter said and sighed. You know better than to behave this way. You've hurt me, Frankie replied. You need to deal with it, Dexter's reply was monotonous. Whatever you do will be the last straw. I will not let you off this time. Over the few days, Dexter had done nothing but try his best to get Frankie off our case. At first, we thought the warning would work, but then he started dropping several messages and calls to Dexter's number. Then, he had sent a bunch of horrible videos to my numbers, things that he claimed he would do if I didn't stay away from Dexter. But they mostly looked like online threats. He kept his distance from us, so we believed he was probably acting that way as a sore loser. But that wasn't the case after all. But now, he was here. You know what should have happened during that incident? Frankie snapped at me. You should have burned in it. Shut up, Frankie. A little more time and you would have burned to a crisp in it. And then somehow, I knew who was behind the incident. My suspicions about Frankie were shared by Dexter, and while the interaction with him led to a little scuffle, one where he managed to hurt me on my still healing hand, we managed to escape from him. We called the cops, and he was arrested on the spot. No warnings were given this time. Because he was still drunk and still horribly angry at me, it wasn't tough for him to confess that it had indeed been him behind the incident. It was indeed him who had been caught on the CCTV camera on the next street. When checked, similar clothes are found at his place, and so did that piece of cloth found at the spot. To say that all of it had been born out of jealousy was a ridiculous thing to say out loud, but that was indeed the reason. I kept my distance from you when I found out you guys were dating, I said to Dexter some days later. I do admit that I was horribly attracted to you, and I did try to flirt with you, but I knew better than to try to steal someone's boyfriend. Then why did he do that? Dexter shrugged. We cannot always explain such things, can we? I am so upset at him. I will punch him. It was my entire life's money in that apartment. I invested tons of my parents' money in it. Bless them. I'm sorry, Ash, Dexter muttered and took my hand in his own. That shouldn't have happened. I hope he does not get out for a while. He will have to pay, right? Yes, he will. A few days later, Dexter and I were staring at my still healing hand. We were on his bed, and I had just commented on how I would have to live with this for the rest of my life. It's horrible, really. It's alright. It looks ugly, I said. Hey, now, Ash. He held my face between his hands. No such thing as ugly on you. I smiled at him. Thanks, but I am allowed to feel bad about this. You are, he agreed, but I don't want you to feel unloved because of this. When I tried to deny it, he shook his head. I overheard your conversation with your parents, and I'm sorry I did that, but Ash, do not fear that, please. I will try, I promise. He pushed my fringes behind my ear. What do you want to eat? He asked. Blueberry cheesecake, I answered, and he huffed out a laugh. What? It's good, and I'm coming with you. Sure, my lord, he replied, and pulled me up on my feet. He dropped a kiss on my temple. I am glad you are here. I'm glad you're here. A few days later, Dexter and I were walking side by side, hands clasped, and right into the heart of the local supermarket. It was the first time we were walking in broad daylight as such, having gone through the worst of life in just 1 week. The process of law was still going on, but life went on, or whatever they said. And both Dexter and I were hungry. You know, my boss is calling me back to the office next month. When did that happen? Dexter asked, dropping cereal boxes in the cart. Last evening, I received an email from HR. God, don't they understand the urgency? He murmured. I shrugged and placed a kiss on his cheek. Honestly, I miss being at the office. Even though this isn't the time I want to return, it will help me keep some things off my head, and I desperately need that. Dexter smiled at me with a guilty expression and pulled me close for a side hug. It'll be all right. Now, would you like some ice cream? Yes, chocolate, I replied. Oh, that's very Neanderthal of you. I couldn't help but push him away with a screeching laugh. Screw you. Please, he replied. I struggled a little to bring Dexter to my parents' home simply because he was worried that the incident hadn't left a good mark on his reputation in front of my parents. And while that was partially true, I couldn't deny that they actually liked him right away. They loved him, in fact. When all was said and done, Dexter and I returned to the city only to live together as boyfriends. As for Frankie, well, he was going to serve a while in jail. The end. Have you ever met your partner's crazy ex? Thanks for watching. Consider subscribing to become part of our Rainbow Force, and stay wholesome.